I want to start by talking to you a little bit about what Monday is. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you are actually familiar with the Monday product, and so let's go ahead and go into that a little bit today. So this is what Monday looks like. This is a dummy board or dummy workflow that I've created inside of my demo account. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and open up a dashboard here so you can see the kind of data that folks are summarizing inside of Monday. So overall, at Monday, we are trying to build software for the future of work. Okay, we know that there's millions, if not billions, of information workers out there who are spending most of their time working with information, right? Whether that's coordinating projects or actually building amazing things such as new products, new AI products, designers, marketers, all sorts of folks. And we are building software that is modular and able to support all of those use cases. Already in our product, we support a lot of different types of customers. So that's people from different industries as well as different departments inside of teams. And you can see that right here in my left pane. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see a bit better. All right, so on the left pane, you can see that I already have some template workflows here from sales, marketing, product development, and that's just a small slice of all the kinds of customers that we support. And on top of that, these customers or these verticals, if you will, are not just a one-size-fits-all thing, right? End of the day, marketing teams have to plan a lot of different things. And so we have workflows specifically for all of those use cases, and they can customize those. I'll give you a couple of examples. So right here, I have a board or a workflow, or a table, whatever you want to call it, that helps a marketing team plan the launch of a product, right? And so you can map out all of the tasks that you have to do in a project, and you can make sure that everyone is on the same page about what needs to be done, who's going to be handling it, as well as the timeline. All the fields on this table, or what we call board, are super customizable. You can add more, you can remove some, and they are all pretty rich in terms of their functionality. This is not a spreadsheet. You can do way more than that. You can even communicate with your team by clicking here and starting a conversation. So there's a lot of different functionality inside of a Monday board. But I want to touch on that customization piece a little bit. Okay, so we have, of course, marketing teams. When I started at Monday, marketing was like our biggest vertical, but since then we've expanded so far. We have a lot of sales teams who are using Monday, and they're not only using it for example, planning out their hires, right? So I have this headcount planning table here, which essentially helps folks determine who do they need to hire, when are they hiring, and are they on track or not. But we also have folks who are actually running their sales cycles inside of Monday. So I have here a contacts board, which if you've used any CRM, you're probably familiar with, as well as a properties board, which in this case is for real estate. So for folks who are trying to sell properties. So this is what Monday looks like. And look, end of the day, the table structure is just a small part of what Monday offers our clients. We believe that having a single source of truth for customers or for users is super important to help teams get on the same page, but we've added a lot more functionality on top of this table just in order to help leadership and help leadership summarize and get an executive summary of the work that they're doing. We have an automation infrastructure and an integration infrastructure, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on that today. So we already have and have had for a few years an automation framework, right? And this basically lets you create automated flows inside of Monday. So when anything happens inside of your workflow, you can automatically trigger the next step, right? For example, if every item gets created, there's a salesperson who needs to be assigned by default, you can go ahead and set that up. Or if you want to get notified when a date changes, you can set that up. And we've had this for a while. And we find that actually our users are using this a lot, to the point where some of our users say that Monday is an automation tool. Like, that is primarily what they use the tool for. And going back to the future of work part, we really believe that automation, when done right, can really make work much more easy for the folks who are doing it, right? And to begin with, we started with these kind of automation recipes, these triggers that essentially get robots to do what you would otherwise manually do. And we're taking it a step further with the AI assistant. And so let me just go ahead and show you what that AI assistant looks like. So right here on this board, by the way, this is a preview, like it's alpha stage or even pre-alpha. So there may be some issues with it, but we'll get through them. So when I click on this AI assistant, the different apps that I can use will actually come up here, and you can use any of these apps to run tasks on top of Monday. And here, let me go ahead and open up a different board, and I'll show you what this looks like. All right, so right here I have a roadmap board. This is basically like a product roadmap for a product team or a dev team. And if I click on AI Assistant, I can select from a number of apps. These two are apps that I built inside of my demo account, which is why one of them has a default name. And then we also have a task generator app, which is one of the many apps that we're trying to build on top of this, this infrastructure. And if I go ahead and click on the app that we're going to build today, which is board data enrichment, you'll see this, this box that comes up. And basically what this app does is it lets you enrich the data on your board with generative AI, specifically in this case with GPT-3. Okay, and so you know what? I just realized I have connected this to the wrong app. So let me go ahead and change this. I did like some steps right at the end. This is what we're actually going to build. And so let me switch to the final version and we can see it. Okay, so now when I click on this, the final version will come up, okay? And this is what we're gonna build together, okay? What we're doing is we're enriching data from Monday with GPT. And so what I can do is select a group and a column, which is essentially like a list of cells to update, and then I can update them with GPT. So let's take one as an example. Let's take Q1. And in the output column, let's do goal. Okay, so in this case, it's like the goal of that specific roadmap item. And let's just generate some goals, okay? All right, so right here. And I'm gonna start by just saying, generate a goal for, and then what I'm gonna do as well is @mention other columns on this board. And so this not only lets you just create items from a prompt, but actually it lets you do that dynamically based on other data on your board. So essentially what we're doing here is we're taking the power of GPT. We're taking the rich data that lives inside of Monday, excuse me, and we're combining those two. So you can essentially generate anything with GPT and Monday while keeping it in the context of the work that you're doing. And this is just one example of things that you can do inside of Monday. And you can see that when I click on this, or when I hit run, these goals get populated. And as you can see, because the prompt is not that great, they're pretty generic. But the mapping has happened and the data has actually gone through. And with all of that said, let's actually start to get into the nitty-gritty and let's start building something. All right. So let me just look at my notes and let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is the actual infrastructure that we're using here, right? What are the various hooks that my app is hooking into, and what APIs am I using? Okay. So when I click on the AI assistant and then I click and I select my app from this list, what I get is an iframe here, right? An iframe, for those of you who are not familiar, is basically just a little window that your app runs inside of. Excuse me. It's essentially your app is embedded inside of the space. And the app, when it loads, does a couple of things, and we'll go through it in a bit. It first retrieves the options of these two dropdowns. So it retrieves the structure of the board, which is the groups, and it also retrieves the columns on the board, which are these fields that are available. And it presents them in these dropdowns, which, by the way, you can see are already styled, excuse me, in the same way that Monday is, because we have a set of React components that you can actually build off of. So I literally just copy pasted the word dropdown, added some props, and was able to set these up. And then after that, once it retrieves that information and it presents it to the user will then configure everything. I have this text component here. which lets me write whatever I want. What should our next goal be given this topic? And then this text component also uses this tags component that is open source. So I can like mention various pieces of data here. And this data is coming from the columns, which is also presented in the dropdown. And I'm going to put goal, not goal, what is it, topic in here. Okay. And so that's what the UI is doing. Okay, but that's just one part of the app. When I hit go, what this is doing is it will make an API call to my own custom backend, which I'll show you in a little bit, which will essentially send the value of topic for each of the items, as well as the prompt. And then what my backend does is it maps all of that data together. It sends it to GPT, comes back with the responses, and then pushes those into the columns using the Monday API. And so when I hit go, this is what's going to happen. And it does all of these things in one full stack app. I don't have to worry about authentication into Monday because our SDK, our software development kit, actually gives you what I call like free authentication or seamless authentication with our API. So as long as your app is running inside of Monday, you don't have to worry about whose user's API key am I going to use or anything like that. All you really have to do is ensure that the connection between your front end and your back end is secure. And my example app already sets all of that stuff up. All right. Let me quickly go into the Twitch and just see if folks have any questions so far.
I can help with that. I have just one question regarding the API. So basically, can we use any large language models for this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, you can use any LLM for this. You can use even a non-LLM system on the back end. And actually, I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. So let me switch over to the code. And I'm just going to show you what the structure of this app is so you can get a sense of what this does. Okay, so the app itself, right, the front end version of the app all lives inside of this final code file, and I'll share all of this code with you after the call. And what this is doing is it basically just sends the prompts to a backend. And the backend, this backend is very, very simple. Okay, literally all it does is it checks for authorization. Okay, so when you get a post request to the backend, it checks if the request is authorized, and then after that, it just passes those along to openai. Okay, and so what that means is you can actually update this example code to receive prompts or receive completions from any LLM. And with some adjustment to the UI, you can even set it up to do anything else, right? So if you wanted to do semantic search here, you could. If you wanted to more in a more nuanced or complicated way, get data from Monday, maybe files from Monday, and send them to a system that extracts data from those files, you can do that as well. So the options are really, really extensive. And that's essentially why we built it this way, right? We want to maximize flexibility, and we want to give folks like you who have a much stronger understanding of AI than I do, for example, give you the tools to build something really, really amazing.
One more question I can ask from the chat. Will you be sharing the example code?
Yes, I will. Actually, I have the example code right here. So let me go ahead and drop that in the chat so that you can see it for now. Please note that the infrastructure that we're using is in alpha, so you won't be able to do that much with it right now, but you'll be able to do that a bit later when the hackathon runs. Actually, well, let's see. I think I'm having some problems with the chat, so I'm going to just send this over to you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, yeah, I'll send it to you. Awesome. Okay, cool. These are really good questions. Please keep them coming. I see we have 20 folks here. And yeah, it's great to see so much engagement. All right, so where were we? Let's talk a little bit about the code and let's build something, okay? So that question actually helped me cover the first bit that I wanted to talk about, which is what the backend is doing. This is a Next.js app, which means I can create my front end and my back end in the same repo. If you wanted to create two a front end and a back end in different repos and set them up separately, that's totally fine. For example, if you wanted a Python backend or whatever, you can set those up. In this case, I'm just using Next because it's very easy for me to show you the full stack layout without that much more work. Okay. Great. So let's talk a little bit about the code that's actually happening, and let's build it together. Okay. So this specific app, when you go in and you look at the final code file, which is in examples, and specifically in live stream examples, you'll see a lot of different information, but I can simplify a lot of it for you. Okay, so we have some helper functions up here that just let us get data from Monday more easily, and we'll use that in a few minutes. And then after that, the actual code is a functional component. For those of you who are familiar with React, this will all be familiar with to you. And the first, what is this, 71 to 93, the first 20 lines of code is just state, okay? Honestly, all this does is ensure that the UI responds the way you expect it to and in a useful way for the user, okay? It's not really doing that many actions, okay? And then after that, I have 3 functions, okay? One is called handle column select, which just sets the output column state to whatever the user chooses. I have the same for group, okay? And so when I, let me show you what that looks like. When I update the drop downs, then my app knows what's selected, okay? So these are running when I hit these 2 buttons, okay? And then after that, I have handle send. And this is where the bulk of the work is being done. And this is where the bulk of the work that we're going to do today is being done as well. Okay, so there's a couple of steps here, but essentially what I do is I get the value of the prompt. I get the column values of whatever data I'm trying to map. So in this case, if it was topic, then I get the values for topic. So database, customer success, and so on. And then when I hit send, my app just consolidates those 2, right? So it takes that topic keyword, replaces it with the value of topic in here, and then sends that to my backend so that my backend can then retrieve the prompts from GPT and do all that fun stuff, okay? And then once it does that, we get a list of prompts, or get a list of completions rather. So if I have 10 items, I'm going to get 10 unique completions. And then I go in and I push those values to each item, right? So in here, for each item in the API response, I am updating an item on Monday, right? So I'm executing a Monday API call. And then once everything finishes, I just say, okay, it's successful, we're done. So anyway, that was like a lot of breezing through a bunch of code, and I'm sure some of you are scratching your heads right now, and that's totally okay. We're gonna build something together, okay? And so let me go ahead and X this out, and let me switch over the app to my boilerplate, and we can start building the various components for this, okay? So in page.tsx, this is where the actual code lives. Well, not the code, but this is where the component is declared, I guess. And you'll see that it lives inside of this app context provider. And this is just a React context provider, which tells the component that this is the board that you're on, this is the structure of the board, and other contextual information, such as the logged in user and stuff like that. So you can use this context to create a richer experience for the user. And in this case, what we're doing is just using it to connect to the right board. So we're making the right API calls. All right. So let me go back to a boilerplate, and we're going to do a couple of things, okay? So this is what the app looks like now, okay? I changed that component and it reloaded, and you can see that it only has a text field, right? The text field has a lot of different events associated with it, and so I thought, let's not bother creating all of that on today's call. Instead, let's go ahead and use the React components to add those dropdowns. And then let's talk about the actual work that the app is doing in terms of the mapping the data, sending it over to our backend, and so on. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, and you can see in the boilerplate that I already have some to-dos here. So I can do everything that I want to do here. First thing I'm going to do is, let's not worry about the drop downs just yet. I just want to show you what my API is doing. Okay, and so let's just send a prompt to my API. So this function actually retrieves the input as a string, and so I can write a response here and actually like call that API. Okay, so I'm going to call this const AI API response equals. There's a object here or a hook called AI API status that actually contains all the data, all the logic, I guess, around actually using this API. And so I don't have to worry about like making a fetch call or anything like that. It's already handled inside of this hook. And so I'm just going to do AI API status dot fetch data. And this is the JSON that I'm going to send to my backend. I'm already going to just tell you what my backend requires. It requires an array of items. Okay, so these are the items that it will update. And currently it's not updating anything, so we can send some dummy data there. It asks for some prompts, which is an array of prompts as well, one or more prompts. And then it asks for n. And n is just the number of results it should get for each prompt. In this case, we're going to use one. But this API is set up in a way that if you wanted to use one prompt to get like 10 results, you could do that as well. Okay, but in this case, we're just going to do one. And let's go ahead and add some dummy data here. So items, I'm just going to put in a dummy item ID. Okay, so this is supposed to be the item ID of that item inside of Monday, which is a number. I'm just going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for now. And for prompts, I'm going to put input. All right, and so that means that whatever string is entered into that text box, it'll send that to my backend, and we'll get a generated response. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna put something a little bit fun. I'm gonna put give me the name of a Pokemon. And now when I hit send, what this is going to do is it's going to make that API call and return the value. And I just realized that I didn't open up our network tab, so we can't see that happening. Let me go to network and let's see, has it preserved it? No, it hasn't. So we're going to try that again. By the way, I'm going to pop this out so we have a little bit more space. Okay, and I'm going to hit go again, and this should make the API call we want. There we go. And so it calls this prompts API. Hopefully you can see it. I wonder if I can make this a bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So it gives me the prompts. So it sends out the data that I listed, right? So give me the name of a Pokemon with this dummy item ID. And the result is here. So it gives me an array of responses for each item that I give it. Since I only gave it one item, I get a result, which is Charizard, which is the name of a real Pokemon. And I didn't say it's a fake Pokemon, so that's fair. We'll give it a pass here. All right, so that is step one. Okay, we know what the API is doing, or rather what our API is doing. It's just essentially passing that data to GPT and giving us the response. Now let's actually do something a bit more interesting here, okay? So the first thing we want to do is let's go ahead and retrieve the items that are in the group that we're going to update. Okay, so I want to essentially retrieve the structure of the Monday board, which is what my note says right here. All right, so to do that, I'm going to start by adding these drop downs. Okay, the first drop down I have populated right here, just so that you can see the structure, and then we'll add the second one as well. So this dropdown component is imported from the Monday React component library. And basically, it is a component that you can use off the shelf. It requires a few props for you to input. So for example, there's a size component, there's a size prop rather, there's a placeholder, which is that text that shows up inside of the dropdown. On change, which means what happens when I click on this. I'm going to call the handle group select function, which is over here. And then finally, the options, which are the data that we're populating the dropdown with. it's board groups for dropdown, which actually I retrieve using a hook that is available inside of this code. So you don't have to rebuild that logic. It's just called, where is it? Called here, use board groups, okay? And so already you have the code to actually retrieve the groups from the board and use them without doing that much work, okay? Cool, so now that I have added that, let me go ahead and add the column one too, okay? So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna do a drop down, and let me add these props. Options equals board columns for dropdown component. On change equals handle column select. Placeholder, choose a column, and size, we'll just do small. All right, and so now I've added these two dropdowns, what we should see over here is, two column and a group, okay? So I already have that dropdown populated, and literally all I had to do was ensure that the data is available for me to push into this column, and I imported the component. And so this should make your life a lot easier in terms of setting up the UI for your app, because I'm sure there are a lot of you who are much more familiar with the back end of things and need some help with the UI. And so that's why we have the components ready. Okay, so now that we have these components, let's go ahead and retrieve the structure of the Monday board. And let's actually do this before sending the input prompt to my API, okay? And so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to call this like items from Monday. And this is going to retrieve data from Monday using a helper function that I already have called, I think it's called get items and column values, okay? And this is the helper function right here, okay? And what I need to give it is the group name, the context, and the column IDs of the columns that I want to retrieve. And then after that, it's going to execute a Monday API call. Again, I have another helper function here in the helpers, the helpers folder, if you want to use this straight out of the box to make your API calls. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Monday API, it's a GraphQL API. So what I need to do is construct a query, which essentially defines what data I'm retrieving from Monday. And what I'm retrieving is essentially the items and their column values for a given group on a given board, okay? And so when I do this, I need to then give it a group, which I think is, actually, I don't remember what this is called. It's called selected group, okay. And then the context is just context. And then the column IDs that I'm returning is all of the column IDs. So I think that's just word columns for. And just to double check, I'm going to go back to my final code and we'll make sure that that syntax is correct. Oh, it's just called, here, column IDs, because what I'm doing is, okay. So I forgot a step. What I need to do is I need to retrieve not all the column IDs, but the column IDs of the supported columns, okay? And so I have another helper function here, get column IDs from input tags. And essentially what this is doing is it is taking that that data that's in the input, right? So remember how I wrote some stuff here and I included some columns. It's getting those column IDs and it's then only retrieving that information, okay? And so I have column IDs here, and then I'm going to put column IDs right here. And so what this is going to do is give me the items for the data that I get the items for the group that I want to update, and the column IDs for, not the column IDs, the column data for the columns that are relevant to my mapping. You may be wondering, why do I need to only filter for these column IDs? And the answer is scalability. Look, end of the day, Monday users can have tons and tons of columns on their board. And we want to just make sure that our app doesn't freeze because someone has like 100 columns on their board. And so we only want to get the stuff that's relevant, okay? And so I'm retrieving that here. And then let's go ahead and actually, let's actually like return that to my API. Okay, so over here, we're gonna do if items from Monday dot is success. We're then going to make this API call right here. Okay, and for items, instead of this, I'm going to return items from Monday. And actually, let me double check what this returns. Okay, it returns Monday API response. So it should be items from Monday dot, and then depending on what data, data structure comes back, I need to then access it. Okay, and so you know what? Let's just keep this as is and see what that data structure looks like. And this way we can play around with the Monday API a bit too. All right. Cool. So now that I have topic here and I have my network tab open, so I can inspect what API call is being made. Okay, let's clear this out and let's hit go. And what we'll see is here, this v2 call, which is the call to our API endpoint, which is api.monday.com/v2, which is why it says v2. And this is the query that I provided, right, which includes the column IDs that I want to send, as well as the specific board ID for this table. And in the query, I have an error here. Query has complexity of 10 million, which exceeds the max complexity. Okay, so I definitely did something wrong here. Let's find out what I did wrong. Column IDs should be get column IDs from input tags. That is correct. Let me go into get items and column values and see what this does. Go to definition. All right, so what this is doing is making this same API call as before. It's retrieving a single board, a single group, and should be retrieving just one column ID, okay? Now, if I'm getting a complexity error, it basically means I'm trying to retrieve more data than I have than my budget allows for. And it's telling me it's like I'm getting more than like double that, right? For some reason, this didn't happen before. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna hit refresh. Just one time, because sometimes the state that's connected to the app doesn't get updated when you do a lot of hot reloads. So let me try this. Let's see if this actually does anything. Okay. And go, and let's see if this comes out. Ah, there we go. Wait, is it this one? Okay, see it. You can see I'm making a lot of API calls. Here it's this one, right? That has the column IDs, and you can see that it works now. So I think there was some issue with the state that was being stored, and it was probably asking for more column IDs than were necessary. But anyway, so now I have this, and you'll see that in the response, I get all of this data, and the actual information that I want, which is the column values, lives inside of, oh, sorry, not the column values, the IDs. They live inside of this nested structure, okay? So I need to make sure that my code is accessing that nested structure correctly. So to do that, right here, and I know I'm going into like very, very deep into this, but I want to give you a little preview of how using the Monday API works, so that when you actually start building, you can start being efficient. Okay, so I need to get boards, which is an array. So I'm gonna access the first board. I'm gonna get groups, also an array, and I'm gonna access the first group. And then inside of groups, I have an array of items. So I'm gonna do items dot ID. Okay, so what this is gonna do is it's gonna give me the first item, okay? And instead of that, what I want to do is actually get an array of all the item IDs. Okay, and so to do that, I'm going to use the map function. And so right here on this items function, on this items array, I'm going to call map, and I'm going to call this item. And so what map does is it calls a function on every element of a specific array. And in this case, I'm going to do return item.id. Oh, item.id. And so what this is now going to do is it's going to create a list of item IDs where each element is the ID of an item. And the reason I have to do it this way is because the data that we get is not in the structure that I want it to be. And so I need to just pick out these numbers and put them in a separate array. Okay. I'm getting an error here. Okay, this is just a TypeScript error. I'm just gonna put any here and get rid of that. All right, now let's see if this works. Actually, instead of doing all of that, I'm just gonna cheat. Yeah, here. Okay, so item IDs list is this map thing. Okay, cool. So we're just gonna do this and let's see what happens. So in this case, it's just gonna send the same prompt for all of these item IDs, right? But we'll get to that later. I'm gonna hit send, and I should see at the bottom here prompts, and I'm just interested in the payload. I can see I get the IDs for each item, so I'm already mapping the data correctly and sending it to my backend. Next step is now to send a unique prompt to every single item. Okay, it doesn't really help that I'm sending the same prompt because eventually I do want to map values into each prompt. And so let's go ahead and do that here. So remember how I used this map function? I'm going to do this again. And I'm going to construct a list of prompts. Using this exact same structure or theory, right? So if I do items for Monday dot all of this, now what I want to do is for every item in Monday, I want to just return the input. Okay, and so this is going to be really simple, and all this is going to do is give me an array of the same prompt. What is it? 4 times. Okay, so right here, I'm just going to put prompts equals prompts. Wait for it to compile. Okay, compiled, and now let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to clear my network tab as well so that we have a bit more space to use this. And let's hit run. And what this is going to do now is just give me a list of prompts. Yeah, so it's the same prompt for every single item as well as the items. So I have 2 prompts and 2 items. Okay, and this will come in useful when I have more prompts. Okay. All right, so step 3 now is to actually start updating Monday items. Okay, let's update the Monday items with this kind of, if you don't mind me saying, kind of garbage prompt. Okay, because I have this like ugly input data in here. But let's keep that as is. Let's update the items, and then after that we can like do the dynamic mapping part after. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to basically retrieve a set of responses, right, from my API. And so the responses here are an array of 2 items. Each one has an item ID and a result. The item ID is useful because I'm going to use this to update the item. And the result is useful because that's the data that I want to push into the item. Okay. And so right here, I'm going to put, I need an await here. Okay, so we're going to use a map again. It's my favorite function right now. AI API response dot map. Okay, so I'm going to get for each of these elements in the array, I'm going to say result. Let's call this result. All right, so what I want to return, so right now what I get is, let me just do this. A list of objects with an ID and a result. Okay. And my output should be make an API call for each of these results, okay? And so here, let me call this const item updates, okay? So for each of these, the map function can return an array. It can also just like do something for you. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to execute a Monday API call. For that, I'm going to use this helper function that I set up already. And here, this is the example. So it's like I have to run await and then the execute Monday API function, and then the query that I want, as well as variables if I want to send those. Okay. And so where did I lost my place? I'm used to having a much bigger screen, so I'm just getting a little bit lost here and there. Okay, so let's do this. Return await execute Monday API call, and I need to do two things. Okay, I need to include the query, and then after that, I need to put some variables. And variables are dynamic data that will run where basically you can like update the query without having to like insert information into a string. Instead of doing that, you can use the same query and you can update, for example, a board ID or an item ID. All of these dynamic values, you can insert them into the query without having to worry about like concatenating 1,000 strings, which can be error prone, okay? So the way the Monday API works, or the way the GraphQL works, is that we have to send it a query string. Okay, so that's what I'm building right now. And I'm going to be listing out, in this case, like the operations that I want to do. Since I want to update items, okay, so that's like an update operation instead of a read operation, I'm going to use the keyword mutation, which is just the GraphQL lingo for just change something, okay? And the specific mutation that I want to do is called not create item, change column value. And specifically, I'm going to use the change simple column value mutation, which let me go ahead and open up our API docs, and you can see essentially if I was to start this from scratch, how you would get to this data. Okay, so in our API reference, where you can go to developer.monday.com, and then there's a link at the top for API reference. I just like skip straight to here. And then if you actually just search for change simple column value. Oh, I get a lot of stuff. So let me just go directly to columns right here. Okay, change simple column value. So this tells me what the mutation does. It gives me an example, and it tells me the arguments or the data that I need to send it. So I need to send it a board ID, a column ID, an item ID, and the value, okay? And so right here, board underscore ID equals, you know what? We have 10 minutes left. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to just copy the API call from here, because end of the day, you don't necessarily need to see me type out a query. So here, let me unfold this whole thing, and let me just copy from here to here. Okay, and don't worry, I'll explain what it does. But this way, we're just going to save a little bit of time. All right. So what this is doing is it is making a mutation, as I said before. Okay, and it is running this change simple column value operation. And after that, it returns an ID, okay, which is, we're not going to use it right now, but essentially in GraphQL, every time you make a change, you then retrieve the data that you just updated, okay? And then the variables, this is the important part. This is all the data that we're actually sending it, okay? And so for the column, we're going to send it the output column, which is the state value from that dropdown. For board ID, we're going to send it the board ID from the context object, okay? For the item ID, we're going to get the ID from here, and we're going to run parse int on it just so that it's an integer when I send it. And for the value, we're going to send the result of this result. And actually, I named this result, and that makes it a bit confusing because it's result.result. But essentially, this means it's the completion that was generated for this specific item. Okay. And then now I have one problem, which is that this it doesn't like that I'm not using async here, and so create item. That should do it. Okay, what is this? This is giving me a TypeScript error, which I can ignore. Okay, so now what this is going to do, now that we've written all of this code, is it's going to create that item for every completion that we get back. Sorry, it's not going to create an item, it's going to update an item. Absent-minded on my part. But yeah, so essentially to show you what this is going to do, okay, it's going to take all of these completions. It's then going to use the Monday API to say, okay, for each of these line items, let's go into this specific column or whatever column is chosen, and let's insert whatever information that GPT gave me, okay? So let's set this up one more time. I'm going to go ahead and open up my app. And I'm going to choose the output column. Let's do goal. And instead of updating this top group, let's update the bottom group. And again, this is not going to, we haven't introduced the mapping element yet. So let's just do a prompt that doesn't require any data from the board yet. Okay, so give me the name of made up AI application. And so I wonder what GPT would do here. Okay, let's see what comes up. Ha ha ha! Smart Advisor AI and Smart Tax Assistant AI. So there we have it. I've already gone ahead and created the integration step. So GPT is giving me information and I'm pushing it to Monday. And I want to pause here because already without the mapping element, I've already created a pretty powerful app, right? What I can do is take some input from a user, take some configuration from a user, run any arbitrary API call that's connected to an AI system, whether that's GPT or whether that's image generation or any other LLM or anything like that. And then I can push that data back to Monday, right? So what you end up with is essentially a workflow or a product that covers the entire user lifecycle inside of Monday, right? So the user can start or invoke your system from inside of Monday, and it can actually see the information back to Monday. So I don't know if any of you are already building an AI system that you're looking for ways to distribute. I think this is a great place to do that, right? Because you can take what you've built, integrate it into someone's workflow that they're probably touching every day or every week at least, and really like expose that functionality to users by essentially creating an iframe and then connecting it to whatever system you already have. All right, and so now that we've done the hard part, let's just bring it home. Let's do the last step, which is mapping that data. Okay, and again, for simplicity's sake, I have a helper function here to do that, and it is called, you know what, I'm going to fold everything again. It's called get column IDs. No, it's not called this. It is called, it's in the helpers here. It's called replace tags with column values. So what this does is, remember how in this section, I have this like weird syntax for every tagged element. It just looks for that syntax and it replaces it with the value that I get from Monday. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. Going back into my, where is it? Going back into my handle send function. And when I'm building my prompt, I want to replace this with, replace tags with column values. The input is the prompt, and then column, board columns for tags component, I think. Let me verify that in the example so that we don't end up troubleshooting as our last thing on our webinar. Item.column values. Aha, okay. So essentially over here, the item contains a column value. So I'm going to put item dot column values. And so what this is going to do is replace the tags with whatever are the relevant values for the item. And now let's do this. And you know what? Let's do this on a more interesting workflow, okay? So here, now that we've built everything together, let's just generate some information on this board. I know this is a roadmap board, but let's just use it as something else. Let's call this addresses. Okay, this is a really simple use case. Okay, and let's start by saying, okay, generate to me a bunch of addresses, okay? And I know we're almost out of time, but I want to just show you what this looks like. Generate an address in what country should we pick? All right. For those of you who are still online, give me a country in the chat, and I will put that in here so that we can generate an address for that.
Can we go with Poland?
Yes, we can. Okay.
Well,
so
we have Algeria in chat. Brazil. Okay, it's a competition now.
Okay. Generate an address in Poland or Brazil.
Let's
or
go with
Algeria.
Yeah. Perfect.
And let's see what if GPT can handle this. Okay. And so we're going to get an address. Okay. And there we go. Okay, this is giving me Algerian addresses. Cool. And so then now in the goal, let's actually just like extract the city from here. Okay. And so for this, I want to like make my prompt a little bit more like thoughtful, just because I want to give GPT as good of a chance to solve this as possible. Okay, so I want to say like get the city from the address. Address, okay, and then city. Okay, and now I'm going to hit go, and let's see what happens. Hey, there we go. Okay, I don't know where places are in Algeria, so I'm assuming El Achur is a city, and Al. Actually, this may not be a city because I think that just means Algeria. But what I ended up doing is enriching the data on my board with GPT. Right, I was able to like run some formulas inside of Monday using GPT. And look, this is a really simple example. Okay, this is the end of my demo in terms of like what live coding we're going to do. But I just want to talk a little bit about what we've done and how you can move forward with this. Okay, I for this demo used GPT 3.5, which is not even the biggest one. And already I was able to get some like simplistic stuff out. If you can take this and connect it with any of the other like amazing LLMs that are available, especially ones that are connected to specific use cases, I think you can get a lot more mileage out of just this demo app. On top of that, it doesn't do any kind of prompt engineering, right? So it just gives the input as is. But what you can do is instead of allowing any input, you can specify this to maybe an app that only generates sales orders, right? And so you create a prompt that generates sales orders, and then you ask the user to only input one part of the prompt. So that's another way you can make this more efficient or more accurate. But basically, the world is your oyster. You saw that you can use the Monday API to pull any data from this board. And so you can get date columns, you can get files, you can get numerical values, and then you can create new solutions from that, whether that's pushing data to columns or writing text updates, which is I know something that LLMs are really good at, or even generating new orders and uploading them to Monday. But there you have it. That is the demo that I have for you today. Olesia, do we have questions? Should I stop sharing my screen and we kind of go through those?
No, we can keep the screen, but yeah, we do have questions. The
Okay.
first thing I want to ask is about the complexity of the project. So how complex it can be with AI assistant? Can we connect Whisper or 11 Labs to involve like voice to text or text to voice, etc.? So what can be also integrated except of text generation here?
Yeah, of course. So if we're talking about the like top end of what's possible, you can be as complex as possible. Okay, this is not the kind of hackathon where you have to use either a no-code tool or something off the shelf. If you did want to do something with voice to text, for example, you could definitely do that. Monday has. Let me actually show you a couple of other functionalities that Monday has that I think fits those use cases. So the first is docs. I didn't actually cover this because I wanted to focus on the table, but we have work docs available inside of Monday. So folks do use Monday to either use work docs to make notes for themselves or as a single source of truth for the team instead of switching around between other doc platforms and Monday. Okay. Inside of this, you can actually add your AI assistant either to the top or when you create an item here as well. I don't have one here, so you can't see it, but you will be able to do that as well. And so voice to text is a really good use case for this. You can create a little box that lets you record some information. You can then dictate whatever you want to say in the doc, hit go, and then have all of that show up on the document itself. So essentially, I can start dictating my next job description, my next meeting notes, anything like that. Does that help?
Yeah, that's really helpful, and the use case especially because actually in LabLab we are using it for project management and for managing the hackathons, and it's super interesting to see how like big possibilities we have here to build on the
Yeah.
platform itself.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. I mean, it's hard in 1 hour when I have to have to code for 45 minutes to go through all the different use cases, but there really is a lot. I'm sure folks also have ideas for like sprint planning. One idea that someone threw out is like writing a sprint retrospective. So ingesting the data in sprints, whether that's like the notes or whether that's like actual hard data such as story points, velocity, and so on, ingesting that and then creating a report. So that's also something that is possible.
All right, I have last one question, and still,
Mm-hmm.
guys, for those who are on the stream, please, this is the last time to ask the question now, and after that, only on Discord. So the last question I have: do you have maybe some favorite examples of apps that were built based on this AI assistant already, and you want to share it with us to give us some inspiration before the hackathon, before the idea formation process?
That's a really good question. So when we built this AI infrastructure, honestly, we are building it for not for the hackathon, but we're really timing it for the hackathon. So it's not like we already have 10,000 AI apps that are in our marketplace. The folks who are building for the hackathon are going to be the first people there. But I can throw some ideas out there. In order to prepare for this, our developers actually went in and played around with the infrastructure and built a few things. They're pretty simplistic, okay? So they took about a weekend of work, but I think they'll give you a good understanding. So the first thing is this task generator, which shows up here, right? So that's essentially, look, you have a new project, you want to generate some tasks, you're not sure where to start. You can use generative AI for that. We also have a text summary app, which I don't have enabled in my demo account, but basically what you can do is take some data from these text updates and summarize them. So you can take all the updates from a board and summarize them into one place. And then we also have a chat bot that suggests formulas to you. So we have this like formula column, which is available. It's not on this board, but I'll just go ahead and add it for you. And you can basically write Excel formulas here. So like divide some number, divide estimated story points by 3. Okay, let's just hit this and it divides it. And a lot of times our users don't know how to write complex formulas. And so we've built a chatbot that that suggests formulas. So you tell it, hey, I want a formula that will count the work days between two dates, and it'll give you something.
That's really surprising because we are using it for a long time. First time see the use case of the formula section. That's super thankful
Oh,
for that you showed it actually, really.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually mentioned that because look, for those of you who are joining the hackathon, you still have a week. I recommend spending a lot of time playing around with Monday because the more you learn about the platform itself, the more places you can see your app integrating. There's a lot of data that's exposed on the board, a lot of very like rich functionality, and the more that you can uh, kind of tag on to things that users are already doing, the more successful your apps will be because they're things that either the user already is looking to do, or you can access kind of power users instead of folks who are just using it in a more simplistic way.
Just a really last question. Honestly,
Yeah,
we will let you go, but I want to ask you regarding the timing that you can estimate between, making the app itself and launching on the app marketplace that you have on Monday, because it's really great pros because you don't need to think so much like how to launch the project and how to reach the clients because they're already there. But when it comes to timing, we know that hackathon will be for 3 days, and what after that? So how can you estimate the possibilities for guys to make app during the hackathon, and in which time period they can already launch on the marketplace?
that's a really, really good question. So I would recommend using the hackathon to try and build an MVP, something like really interesting. But then after that, really spend some time to productize that app. I estimate that getting an app ready for production will definitely take a few weeks, and
Mhm.
add on top of that the review process, which honestly depends on how responsive you are. But if you're really, really responsive, you can get through the app review process in 1 or 2 weeks. But of course, we do have developers who essentially like start the review process and then forget about them, and that takes a little bit longer. So as long as you're engaged with us, we can definitely get you into the marketplace as soon as possible.
That's really great, actually, that you just mentioned. So, and during this review process, Monday team is giving some advice and support, right? So you are instantly communicate with guys and say how it can be better.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Here, let me actually, since you mentioned it, I'm
That
going to
was
share some stuff with you in Discord. Uh, Basically, we have a section in our developer docs called "Preparing for the Marketplace," and it contains a lot of information that we've set up to ensure that you don't get surprised during the review process. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to check out is the app review checklist. During the review, we're going to go through your product in a lot of depth to try and understand what does it do, what value does it bring to users, is it secure enough? And a lot of times, folks will build an amazing app, submit it, and then realize, there's one thing in the security section, for example, that I missed. And so, as you're thinking about this, probably not during the hackathon, but right after, really review these guidelines because these are the things that will potentially block you during the review process, and we really, really need to have them squared away as soon as possible.
all right. Really great for you. If you can share just with me the link, and I will just drop it now in the chat so people can
Amazing. Yeah,
instantly
yeah, yeah, I'll
check
go ahead and
it.
do that.
Yeah,
One
that's perfect.
second.
Thank you a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we are done with questions. Otherwise, maybe you have something to add in like in the end, just final inspiration, maybe some advice from you for people that will be starting with Monday.com for the first time, and they will be going to
Yeah.
build an app. Go
Look,
ahead with that.
first off, I'm super, super excited that so many people joined and honestly joined until the end. I know watching someone code is can be dull. And so I think it shows that like folks are really, really engaged and excited to contribute to the hackathon. I would say think outside the box. Okay. The most successful apps that we've had are the ones that can take some missing functionality on Monday and just go to the moon with it. And so I really want you to think about it that way, right? We've had apps in the past that do really simple things, of course, but some of the most successful apps in our marketplace are ones that are very ambitious, right? I think our top app, for example, is a formula suite that basically lets you do a lot of different operations inside of Monday through our automations infrastructure, and it's been really valuable for users because it allows for a lot of different use cases. And so keep that in mind. Like, how can you build an app that's flexible, that can support users' real use cases, and that is like really fun to use as well.
Great. Thanks a lot for the stream, and thanks for answering all the questions. That was really valuable for us. And I hope we'll see you during the hackathon. So we don't say goodbye.
Yeah, this is definitely not goodbye. I'm available in Discord. You can drop a message in the Monday AI channel. So, and I'm looking at those questions and I'm answering them. And if there's something that is private, you don't want to put inside the channel, you can also always DM me if it's like something about registration or whatever.